Chris Rostron, Head of Rugby League Cares. During these unprecedented times, we've been working closely with the RFL, the Rugby League World Cup and Super League to bring you the Rugby League United campaign. The campaign was designed to help the public in Rugby League to improve their general well-being and mental fitness during the lockdown. The campaign is funded by the mental health charity Mind, and we're asking all those that have had access to the support to provide us feedback through a completely anonymous survey online. The survey will only take you 2 minutes and it will provide us with the vital information we need to be able to continue to bring you these services absolutely free of charge. So, hopefully, you'll take part in the survey, which can be found via a link on the website below. So, to you, thanks for taking part in the campaign. We hope it's been of benefit to you all. But more importantly, thanks for supporting Rugby League and Rugby League Cares during these unprecedented times. Thank you.
My name's Johnny Lawless. I'm here today on behalf of Rugby League Cares to have a discussion about what is mental fitness or what is mental health. I'm not alone today. Luckily, I'm surrounded by Rugby League royalty. No other than former teammate Keith Senior and Warrington legend Paul Wood. Morning, guys. If you want to, let's introduce yourselves.
Well, Woody, I'll let you go first, lad. Yeah, Paul Wood, former Warrington Wolves player, and my background in mental health is basically I have suffered from depression. I have been in treatment. I've been in recovery for addiction, and so my mental health issues stemmed a lot from OCD. So that's my background into mental health.
My name's Keith Senior, ex-Sheffield, Leeds Rhinos, England and Great Britain international. Very fortunate to play my career with Johnny as well and go through some great times. Grown a bit of a beard today so we could disguise us, so we could have a little bit of a different comparison. So it's good to have Woody on, who's got a good head of hair, just to separate his difference. I'll talk a little bit more about the mental health side of things a little bit later on when we get through a little bit of the other slides. So I'll just pass over back to you, Johnny, to crack on.
Cheers, Keith. Cheers, Woody. I think you undercooked yourself a bit there, Woody. Former England and Great Britain squad player, over 300 games for Warrington. So between years, you've over 800 first-class games, which is fantastic.
I don't like bigging myself up like Keith, though.
I've got a bit more to big myself up about, though, aren't I, Woody?
We'd be here all day. Which trophies you won, Keith?
So personally about myself, a former rugby player with Halifax, Sheffield Eagles and Huddersfield. I've ended up here in talking about mental health through probably a long journey which started about 8 or 9 years ago. My journey were probably like most rugby league players out, they've got into mental health was through poor mental ill health, which in hindsight now I've got into knowing a little bit more about mental health. I can see why I got to where I got to, but more importantly, this mental health awareness, what we're talking about today, keeps me to be where I want to be. Unfortunately, I lost 2 friends through suicide. Rugby league timelines, the first friend was Matthew Smith, which was more or less 2 weeks after Terry Newton back in 2010. As a very close friend of mine was Matthew. I've known him from amateur days at Siddle, a really good kid. So that's the ultimate spectrum of mental health, is suicide. Lo and behold, 18 months later, I lost my close friend, very lifelong friend, Mick Shaw, former Leeds Rhinos player. Somebody I spoke to every day on phone for quite a number of years, and a really good kid. And it was after Math died, about 18 months later, Mick took his own life as well. Just before Mick had died, probably about 6 months before, I found myself in a place what I wasn't comfortable with, which was poor mental health. I don't know how I got there. I think a lot of it to do with work, the recession at the time. Things were tough work-wise, but I was always using them coping mechanisms, which I'd always used to the rugby league, which was win or lose on the booze. So after a week at work, I'd be going out a couple of nights a week, not looking after myself. And over a period of time, I kind of just fell down the mental health continuum. Suicide was a regular thought, a regular idea, but I didn't understand why I felt like I did. The only one person I spoke to about it, and that was my close friend Mick. After speaking to Mick, he gave me some good advice, but I didn't know how bad he was feeling. And literally within 6 weeks of telling Mick, Mick had took his own life. That was me, what I look back now, and I was on my arse at that time. Luckily, a lovely lady called Emma Rose from Rugby League Cares gave me a call. She must have heard I was struggling a little bit, and she offered me some counselling through Sporting Chance. I met with Colin Bland about 3 or 4 times, and he just kind of explained how Matthew and Mick might have been feeling when they took the decision to do what they did. I couldn't even tell Colin how I felt at the time, but that was that pathway for me about recognising mental health and understanding it. Emma again contacted me a couple of weeks later and offered me a 2-day mental health first aid course. I didn't know what to expect. I went along with it. It's a course run by Mental Health First Aid England, and I attended it for 2 days, and I literally started ticking boxes, what I've been doing wrong, and that gave me the interest of mental health and got me on this pathway I'm on now. With this newfound experience, I got more into mental health. I became a mental health first aid tutor, which enabled me to tutor the mental health first aid course. And since then, it's just kind of grown. We've got a company called Minds Matter, which delivers mental health awareness and first aid training. So I can truly say having the knowledge of mental health awareness has took me to a level where I want to be. And I'm not 99% sure, but I'm sure enough to say that it'll keep me where I want to be, just the awareness of it. So some of the stuff we're going to cover today is things what I've learned on the mental health first aid awareness courses. And I just think it's a great thing to increase your knowledge about it and look to recognising signs and symptoms what maybe can prolong to mental illness. So what we're going to cover today is we'll look at what is mental health, look at the mental health continuum, discuss mental health disorders and mental illnesses. We have a little quiz and look at available support. And also I've got these 2 gentlemen beside me to chip in as and when they need to be. I'm going to call on one now actually, but before I do, we're looking at what is mental fitness. Now the World Health Organization's official term would be mental health is a state of well-being in which an individual realises or his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stress of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. In layman's terms, it's how we think, feel, and behave. So I'm going to put Paul on the spot a little bit and just say, Paul, what does the term mental health mean to you now?
Yeah, for me, mental health means that I'm in a good state of mind, and it pretty much means that I've got everything in perspective, and everything's realistic. It's not me over exaggerating every single situation. I'm putting myself down and putting myself under an extreme amount of pressure. So I like to think when I'm in good mental health, I'm thinking, pretty much straightforward and realistic. I know that when I start having huge expectations of what should be happening, then I'm probably not in a good place. So for me, it's having it's being in a reality that's real, and not in something that's not real. If that makes sense.
It does make sense, mate. It makes complete sense. Thanks for that, Woody. I think I like to always compare it to physical health. Mental health is part of his overall health. I don't think you'd be completely healthy unless you're relatively healthy in both aspects of it. But obviously with mental health, we don't see them obviously signs and symptoms. For instance, if I was sat with a neck brace on, you knew if I can get one on this, you'd see you'd assume I had a problem with my neck. If I was sat here with depression, there's no obvious signs and symptoms by just looking at me that I'm depressed. So mental health, we've all got it. It's part of his overall health, and compared to physical health, you've got to look after it, because if you don't look after it, it can take you to places where you don't want to be or probably don't recognise. Probably what all 3 of us can recognise where we've come from. Going back to the World Health Organization, what they regard as completely healthy is health is a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So just because you're physically healthy doesn't say you're overall healthy. And for instance, somebody who's just run a marathon, you might consider them to be healthy, but they could have a bad form of mental health, if that makes sense. So it's part of his overall health, and we've all got it.
Yeah, and I think just on that, Johnny, as well, you know, my perspective on mental health has changed dramatically over the time since my rugby career and since retiring as well. It's been labelled a lot more as mental health, and I don't call it mental health because I've experienced it, which you have as well, like you talk about with people with a suicide. I've experienced mental health, which I'll talk about a little bit later, with my mother, to the extremes. And we talk about depression and, you know, we talk about anxiety and things like that. And my perspective many years ago was that is not mental health. That is just going through a bit of a tough time. And that's how I labelled it. And that's how you know what I mean? It's like, so the way it's been spoke about at the moment is, you know, I'm going through a bit of a tough time. But now, because you say, you know, I've got a bit of anxiety, straight away, you've got mental health. I still see it as you're going through a little bit of a tough time, but what you're talking about with the mental fitness side of things, I think it is what we talk about is about educating yourself and learning to use your mind a little bit more, because it is a weird and wonderful, complex muscle in the body that does take a lot of work, but we do work mainly on the physical side of things. And I don't want people to think that I'm taking the mic career a little bit too much, because, you know, we all know each other well, and I don't want people to think that we're disrespecting the topic that we are conversing about here. But Johnny, use a better example next time when you're talking about a physical attribute, because you've not got a neck. So don't use the neck brace next time.
Thanks
We
for
know
that.
each other well, so we are trying to keep this a little bit light-hearted as well. Whilst we do know it's a serious subject.
Just while we're on this slide now, and I've got you both here as rugby league backgrounds, and we know similar lads. Do you think a lot of rugby league players get confused with mental health and mental toughness, and they think because they're mentally tough, they're not going to have much mental health issues? Where I found that it's far from the truth.
Well, that was, you know, it's a perfect example of that. Mental toughness was what we was taught. Yeah. You know, being mentally tough is about persevering through a situation and not trying to let it affect you, which is a change of your thought processes. But you couldn't show emotion, you couldn't show weakness, and that's why we bottle things up. And it is just a case of a head down arse. So get what you need to get done and just carry on. It doesn't matter what problems you're going through, you've just got to get through the other side. And I think, you know, with the perseverance of that aspect of it all, that's how we were brought up and that's how we were taught. Yeah. I'll never forget my dad. I didn't have a tough background, I didn't have a tough upbringing, but my dad, you know, if we probably all had it, you'd be crying over nothing. And my dad would turn around and say, "What are you crying for? I'll give you something to cry about if you want." Because we weren't allowed to show emotion, we weren't allowed to show pain, and that was brought into rugby as well. You're not allowed to show physical sides of things, and that's passed on to the mental side of things as well, like I say, with the emotional side of things.
I think it definitely has an effect, but yeah, it is. You probably clarify mental toughness and mental health, the differences. This is just a few people who've probably had a bit of a mental health journey. Top left, you've got Danny Rose. Underneath him with Tyson Fury. Phenomenal story about Tyson Fury. You know, only 2 years ago, suicidal, way overweight, not boxing, to being heavyweight champion of the world. It's a fantastic story. Andy Murray, Keegan Hurst, and Freddie Flintoff. And that guy in top right-hand corner, the man we all know, Keith. Why are you there then, mate?
I just think they wanted to put me on because it's a rugby league slide. Yeah. My issue started when I finished retiring, when I came out of retirement. My coping mechanism, my coping strategy is always rugby. No matter what issues I were going through or problems I had, like I say, you know, going through problem separations, house move, anything like that, which can cause depression or can cause mental illness, I had rugby to fall back on. And we know humour is a massive part of of a coping mechanism. And you're going through some shit, you're going through some problems. You could go in the changing room the next day, within 2 minutes, somebody could take the mick out of you, you could have a laugh and a joke, and then all of a sudden your thought processes and your mental thoughts all change. So you forget about it in a way. And I could hide it with the rugby, focus on the games and focus on my career. As soon as that was taken away from me, because I had to retire through injury and it wasn't on my terms. So it's difficult to deal with because my time wasn't then. And dealing with that was very difficult because I didn't know what I was going to do for the next stage of my life. Because Keith Senior, the rugby player, I know what my purpose was. Keith Senior now, after rugby, it's like I'm still trying to find my purpose. You know, it's like you're still trying to find that big high, which I'm never going to get, I'm never going to find again, and I'm never going to be able to have. So it's replacing it with other avenues. So I massively struggled with that when I finished rugby, coming to terms with it in a real tough way. And I'm still a little bit of a hypocrite in the fact that I work with Rugby League Tears and we talk about talking to other people. I still struggle with that. And I think I'll always struggle with that because I am a little bit of a closed book when it comes to that side of things. Discussing it in this type of forum is a little bit easier, but if we were having a one-on-one conversation, I don't know if I'd be as open in a way. Yeah. Go on, Johnny.
No, I think what's good about you saying that, Keith, and this slide, that's all characters within sport what have openly spoke about mental health. And that's been good at the last couple of years. We're getting more and more people coming out. But I think it's very hard. And touch on what you're saying there, Keith, and you'll probably recognise well, Woody. I think with rugby, you lose. I lost my self-respect. I felt like I lost my identity. Even though other people probably aren't seeing that, inside you feel you've lost your identity and you lose your self-respect. And you'll never be that same person again. But it's very hard to do. But one thing's about good Rugby League Cares now, we prepare players for retirement and put stuff in place for some to go on to after rugby. So that has been a big improvement on it, definitely.
Do you know what? Yeah. And patting myself on back because I did have such a successful career. Growing up as a kid, I never had any drive. I never knew what I wanted to do. I never wanted to be a professional rugby player, and I left school not knowing what I wanted to do. I was just sort of like pushed into a job because an opportunity came at my dad's work. I never wanted to go into college, so I never had that drive and that ambition. And then when I got into rugby, I realised that I had a massive opportunity. And then getting that again, and I just remember being like 35, 36 years old, sat on my sofa and just realising that, me personally thinking that I didn't have a future, because I didn't have my career, I didn't have rugby, and I didn't know what I was going to do or what I wanted to do, and I felt like I'd wasted my life. When everybody else's career is taking off in the 30s and getting promotions, mine was, I felt that mine was the depth of despair, but that's how I thought about it, and that's
other people wouldn't have seen that, would they? Other people wouldn't have seen that, but that's how I felt inside. Yeah.
And looking back on it, you just have to smack yourself around the head and just say how stupid I was to think that, because at the end of the day, I've had the best life possible. Yeah. I've travelled the world, I've played for my country, I've done all these great things. So I was looking at it as a negative side because I was never going to be able to do any of that again, and I never saw any of it happening again. Yeah. So it's like an addiction in the way that you've got to replace something with something else. But I can never replace that. No. I can't replace that, so I've got to substitute it with something, and that's where
you realise that. You've realised that, and that otherwise you're always chasing rainbows and you'll never get there.
Yeah. So you've got to substitute it. And that's where the charity side of things, and you talk about running marathons, I absolutely despise it, but it gives me that little bit of satisfaction that appeases me in a way. So for the good that it does for charity and, the money that's raised, it's also good for me because it's working on me and working on myself.
Right. Just moving on, so I'm conscious of time as well.
Can I just, sorry, Johnny.
Yeah, nobody, you.
Sorry, mate, I was just going to come in there and just say, I completely relate to what Keith's saying there. I think it is being in that safe environment of rugby league. I used to get called a Jekyll and Hyde, because when I was in a rugby environment, I was a completely different person to when I'd come away from this training field. Straight away as I got into my car and I got back home, I felt uncomfortable. I wasn't in that safe environment. And it's a big challenge to come out of the comfort. I was the same as Keith. I had rugby to always to fall back on. When straight, that was my drug of choice, really, to come away with it. And when it's taken away from you, it's again, I use the word perspective, because I think Keith said give yourself a slap and understand that to understand you've had the best life that you could possibly lead. And I think a good word to use is gratitude. Gratitude changes your attitude, as they say. And but it can be a difficult time to have something stripped away from you, and have all that stress to come onto you, and not have some form of some mental health issue around that, because all of a sudden your environment's changed, and it does create a lot of anxiety, because I think it's the unknown of shit. I knew what I was doing every single day of the week. I was preparing for the game, and my structure, my schedule, and everything else. And all of a sudden, everything's out your control. You've got to look forward, and you don't know what the future holds. And we know as human beings that when we're out of control and we can't see what's in front of us, that can create some form of anxiety, unless we know what techniques are in place to sort of bring us back to the moment and say, you know what, at the moment where I am, everything's fine. I don't need to project too far forward. I just need to keep everything in today. And if I can do that, it generally keeps me in a good frame of mental health.
Yeah, I agree with you. Totally agree with you, Woody. I think as well, this next thing we're moving on to now, I'll ask you a question at the end of it, but you'll recognise yourself on this moving around. And it's just to show that mental health is fluid. And what I like to tell people is that where you look at yourself on this, when I tell you details of it, you might not be where you want to be now, but with the right help and appropriate help, you can get to where you want to be, which I'm talking about, this mental health continuum. Now, it looks a bit complicated to start with, and it's got a posh name, but it's quite a simple monitor to see where you are and where you might have been. And I'll just explain how it is. So you'll see two axes there, vertical and horizontal. The vertical one at the top, we've got maximum mental well-being fitness, and at the bottom we've got minimum mental well-being fitness. On the horizontal one on the left-hand side, we've got severe diagnosis, and on the right we've got no diagnosis. Now, there's 4 quadrants there. We all want to be in this top right quadrant, and we will have been for much of his life. I personally I wasn't out of that quadrant till probably about 9-10 years ago. But the top right quadrant is a person with no mental illness or disorder and has a positive mental health. Now, the bottom right quadrant is a place where I recognise now where I fell into, which is a person with no diagnosed mental illness or disorder, but has poor mental health. Shifting across to the left-hand side, bottom left, is a person with a diagnosis of mental illness and who has poor mental health. So that's somebody who's got a mental health illness, but they're not doing anything about it. But to top right, it means is a person with a diagnosis of a serious mental illness, but who copes well and has positive mental health. So even if you've got a mental illness with the right, that could be prescription drugs, it could be self-help, it could be self-care. You could still have a positive quality of life, even with a mental illness. Now, I was always at that top right, and I think over time I fell into the bottom right. Now I'm back in top right, and because of the mental awareness, the mental health awareness, what I know, and the knowledge, I'm pretty sure I can keep there, just through making changes and recognising signs and symptoms. But one thing we know, what stops us crossing over, like say somebody from the bottom right quadrant, to actually try and ask for help or go and see a doctor. If you can imagine those big black arrows as barriers, and if you wrote stigma in them, that can what sees us moving across. And I think probably stigma, what we experience in rugby league players and look at what they do, it's that self-stigma of that toughness and don't wanting to reach out and seeing it as a weakness, putting your hand up and asking for help. So stigma can stop us moving around the continuum. But it is possible to move around with the right help and guidance. So I'll ask you this question, and I'll be surprised if you're in the same place. If you can imagine yourself where you are now on that continuum, where you were a year ago and where you were 8 years ago, is any of us in the same place? Because I'm certainly not. I've moved around a bit. You can't, don't get me wrong, you're going to move on a daily basis. You move around a little bit, and you're going to have stuff, bereavements and losses and relationship breakdowns, what will move about. But if you can keep on top of your mental health, you can try and keep to where you want to be. But are you guys with me? You do move about quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that's what, you know, the right-hand side is a lot of, I think, of everybody. You know, for most of us rugby careers, when we're in as comfort zones, we're always the top right. And then as soon as it finishes, we all dropped into the bottom right. And then we're still fluctuating in and out of it. But because we understand a little bit more about when we are getting into the, you know, the bottom right-hand quadrant side of things, we understand now and we can see the signs, so we can then do the work to get back into the top right and do, you know, with all the thought processes and everything that we've learned, we can get back into that top right-hand corner, which, as you say, that's where everybody wants to be.
See, I've come from, I've experienced the left side, so I have, you know, quite openly admit that, you know, I have been into clinics and been diagnosed with a mental health illness through my OCD, and you know, I've, you know, required medication as well for some of my, you know, for some of my mental health illness, and spent a lot of the time where didn't really know what was up with me as a young kid, because I developed, you know, a lot of symptoms when I was particularly young. You know, when I was about 12 years of age, I'd say. So I spent a lot of the time in the right side, but at the bottom. You know, I wasn't diagnosed with anything, but I had poor mental health, and I couldn't deal with how I was thinking. And I kept, you know, I had to think quite a lot about, you know, why am I performing these rituals and behaviours? Why do I constantly have paranoia? And it was only when I got older that it got diagnosed and I got treatment. So a lot of the time I am in the top left. You know, I know that I've got this, you know, this thought pattern of behaviour and these thoughts in my head that, you know, I've constantly got to deal with. But, you know, I know how to manage it. So I've got the tools now to do it, and you know, that's a big plus for me.
That's great to listen to that, Paul. And just while you don't underestimate how you talking about this like you are now and open will help so many people who watch this or hear what you've said. I think it's fantastic, and you'll probably appreciate that stigma around it all as well. I think when people talk about mental health with little knowledge, they always see it as a negative thing, and it doesn't help having the word mental in it. But the stigma is we always think about mental illness when we think about mental health, and that's the stigma. And I think stigma can stop people moving around or reaching out for help, but it is fluid and it can move all the time. And
well, sorry, Johnny, that's a term, being in a rugby environment, and I think people don't really, a lot of lads don't understand the effects it can have. But I was called mental by teammates, and, you know, weird and strange, and he's off his head, whatever, you know, I've been called everything. But you know, I can quite openly talk about it now. And I think the strange thing is that I get a lot of people saying is because they seen that I had a long rugby career. You know, I was playing for 17 years.
Yeah.
People find it hard to believe that I lived with that through a professional rugby career. But on the flip side, some of the traits that I had were really, really positive for me, because it gave me a lot of drive and a lot of, you know, that competitive edge. It's just that I went to a lot of extremes with some of my behaviour, which, looking back, if I could have got an handle on, I generally believe I would have had a more successful rugby career. I would have been a better player if I could have just got, you know, the help a little bit earlier and known what to do.
Yeah, and possibly nowadays, Paul, if you were starting out now as a kid, that education and people seeing signs in yourself would have been probably come earlier. You know, probably since death of Terry Newton, rugby league has done a lot as a sport about mental health. But I remember even when my friend died 2 weeks after Terry, mental health wasn't a term what were on our radar. It's you hear it every day now on television, on radio, newspapers, but on then it wasn't really a term, was it? So people who had mental health issues back in them days, it must have been really hard for them, and that stigma must have been a lot bigger. But brightening up now, lads, we're going to have a bit of a quiz. That's all right. I know you'll like a bit of quiz, Keith. So we can move on here.
I've got glasses on now, don't make me smart.
Well, optical illusion. Right, so I think it's about 5 questions, lads. If you want to chip in at any point, I'll blast through them, and maybe we'll just stop and pause and have a little discussion about a couple of them. So first question. When I first saw these, they did really surprise me, and I got all of them wrong actually. But mental health is responsible for 9 million working days lost and costs £10 billion per year. When I saw that, I thought, oh, well, that's a lot, and probably true. But when revealed slide, it's actually a lot more than that. It's 72 million working days and costs £34.7 billion each year, more than any other illness. Staggering. An interesting one. This 35% of mental illness, excluding dementia, because that's being brought on in your later years, starts before the age of 18. What do you think, lads? Think that's true or false?
I think that's more. I think it's probably possibly more from 18.
Yeah, before the age of 18. It's 75%. It's mind-blowing, isn't it? I'm a real believer about getting mental health into schools as early as possible and getting kids talking about mental health and educating them on it. And if we can get on curriculum, I think it'll be a big difference.
I think that's the beauty at the moment, because it's been recognised. There's a lot more platforms going to be available for kids as well, because everyone is with the adults. But as we know, everything that kids grow up with, it's embedded in them. So, get them nice and early, like we talk about with the mental fitness.
Yeah. And Paul mentioned earlier about it stemmed from being a kid.
Yeah.
Well, it's come from being a kid, so that we get into schools, that'd be great. You probably not answer to this, because it's probably one we recognise on TV and in press. It's, if you're male and aged between 20 and 49 years old, suicide is the most common form of death.
It's true.
Yeah, we're true. I think we know that. We just need a reveal slide. It's true. A couple of stats behind it. There's roughly about 6,500 suicides every year. 75% male. And I think I'm right in saying this. There's no actual reason. There's no scientific reason why they think that is. I have my own beliefs, and you might share these. What's the good thing women are good at doing? What we are good at doing? Talking and talking about his feelings, and having mates who are compassionate.
Yeah,
it's just don't happen, does it? And especially in the changing room, you're not going to open up. And
I must say though, Johnny, like I've got 2 lads. I've got a 12-year-old at the minute, and I'm very, very cautious about how he feels. And it's a different generation for me growing up. I had a computer, and it was just me online, but he's got this Xbox now, and they're all online, and they're on Instagram, and they're on the TikToks and everything, and they're so accessible to their friends.
Yeah.
And I'm very aware of the cyberbullying that goes on.
Yeah.
And the pressures that come with it, and everything that they have to be seen to be perceived as. And every single day I ask my lad, is he okay? Is it okay to talk? Keith said it earlier, he's not great at picking the phone up, but I have to say that's one thing I have completely changed over the last 5 years, is that I can pick the phone up now and I know who I need to speak to. Can't do it with all my mates, because I've still got some of my friends who say shut up and man up. But I know I've got a certain amount of friends that I can ring up who have got a bit of empathy for sometimes when I'm having, and I am only having a shit day. It's generally nothing major, but if I get into my own head and start telling myself that it's a massive issue. So I think the talking side of it is so undervalued. It's so undervalued by lads. And
it'll be something we didn't do when we were
definitely not.
We didn't talk. And
I
think the more you get used to talking about it, it was very hard for me to open up about how I actually felt. So probably 3 years after I felt like that, to actually open up to public and standing for instance, I was struggling. I just felt like showing weakness basically, which we do. But talking about it makes such a massive difference, and doing this is going to help people. I'm sure it is. So yeah, it's a big thing. It's good that you're looking after your kids and watching what they're doing. I think it's important. Yeah. Anxiety is always unhelpful. Do we think that's true? It's something we need, don't we? We need that. We all have it everyday lives. It's a natural response. It's that fight, flight, and freeze, and helps us to avoid danger. It's unhelpful when it's disproportionate to the threat or lasts longer than the threat. But interestingly, Keith, when I spoke to you earlier, we spoke earlier in the week about, you said you didn't feel nervous before a game. I used to get nervous for every game, and I'd worry. I worry about playing with kid outside in basketball in case I lose. I get butterflies for that. I'd worry if I didn't get nervous. Or you say you didn't get nervous. Woody, I don't know what you were like before a game.
Yeah, same. I mean, the anxiety, you know, it's before the game. It's normal. It's bound to be when you're running into, you know, 17 other blokes who are about 16 stone. You're going to get nervous and anxious about whether you're going to get injured, whether you're going to play well, let people down. So, you know, anxiety is a human, you know, condition that we need. I'm anxious sat here now because I want to make sure I want to do a good presentation with you guys and make sure I'm saying the right thing. There's anxiety there. Is that normal?
Yeah.
Of course it is. That's a normal response to what we're doing now. But for me, I've had anxiety when it's definitely not needed. I've created my own, and that's why I talk about living in my own head and not having the right perceptions. I've no need to feel anxiety some days, but I have it because it's, you know, my thought process is not where it needs to be.
And probably like somebody who's got anxiety disorder, the way we felt for that half an hour before a game or before you went for a driving test is the way some people feel like all the time. Worrying about a panic attack or just having that general anxiety, worrying about everything and anything. So that's the kind of feeling, that butterfly feeling is what some experience all day. I didn't know much about anxiety until I started doing the mental health first aid courses, and it's a bit of an eye-opener. It's a massive problem. You know, it's just behind depression in one of the most common mental illnesses.
It is as simple as it is what we think is what we feel, and it is like just saying, you know, change your thought processes, but that's the struggle for a lot of people. Like I say, you know, your thought processes before a game it made you anxious, whereas mine was totally different. So I had to remove myself from what you were going through, because that was your preparation and that was what you were doing. And I think it was Mal Real, it might have been him. And there's certain people you see that they're sick before every game. And I think there was one, it might have been Malcolm Real, I'm not sure, but that one game where he wasn't sick, he knew that was time to finish, because the anxiety side wasn't there anymore. So it's like it lost the passion and the drive for the game. You know, so he changed that around in that way, and that's individuals, and that's the beauty of it, isn't it?
It's funny you talk about anxiety before a game, because I used to get very nervous before a game, and I had certain rituals that I used to perform, and you know, it used to create a lot of anxiety. And when I went to the Priory, and I had treatment regarding my anxiety, my OCD, I completely changed my thought process. So for the last 2 or 3 years of my rugby career, I never used to get nervous before a game. But I think that's because I did a lot of work on anxiety. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And how it could be useful, but then how it could also be detrimental. So I've experienced both sides myself.
Yeah.
We used to have a phone corner at Leeds because we had to do, because we'd have us that were anxious, and then you'd have JP at the other side of the room. He'd be banging his head against a brick wall, and then you'd have Kyle in another corner that would be praying, and they're the different types of anxiety they're dealing with. But we had to make sure that we removed ourselves, so we had a little bit of a fun corner, you know, the group that like to have a bit of a laugh and a joke and take in the experiences a little bit more.
It just shows we're all individual and react to situations differently, and there's no wrong with that. Keith, I don't know if we need to cut you up, make sure you bleeds. I think we're a bit of a machine.
I'm not having Keith was in funny corner though. There's nothing funny.
Whoa. That's my coping mechanisms. I had to, when you've got Lee Smith sat next to you, you've got to laugh, haven't you?
If you've been out with Keith, you know he's about as funny as toothache. But we're on. 50% of people with mental health issues experience some form of stigma. It's not surprisingly. It's 90%. That's about that stigma, about moving across that continuum. It's there. It's there all the time, and we need to remove that stigma if we can and educate people. Right. Look, look, mental health is such a broad subject and covers so many different areas that I'm just going to talk about the 4 main headings, what they come under. Now, on the mental health first aid course, we literally spend half a day on each of these 4 main categories. So I don't want to do it. I can't go into detail about each one, but basically it's split into four areas, which is mood disorders, which is mainly depression. There's a good video we're going to watch after this, the Black Dog video, which was going to go into depression, about depression, give a good understanding of it. Anxiety disorders, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a lot of veterans get, but actually anybody can actually get it. There's a general anxiety disorder, which is worrying about everything and anything. There's a panic disorder, which can lead to panic attacks, and there's phobias as well. One of the main headings, what we probably know the littlest about, is the psychotic disorders. It's under the subheading of psychosis, and under that is things like schizophrenia, and I know bipolar falls under that due to the real highs of the euphoria, what you can get to. And then there's eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder, which I think I get because I keep ordering these millionaire shortbreads that cost a coffee, which I think they're addicted to, so I could afford them. But one of the psychosis, what's there, I know, Keith, you've got personal experience with this, and I'd like to share if you feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll skim over this. I'm just conscious of time, and this is the reason why my beliefs on mental disorders, and like I say, about talking about going through tough times, is because my mother's diagnosed as schizophrenia. She's schizophrenic, and going back many years ago, I think I was about 17, 18 years old when it was a situation, it was a marriage breakup, so it was an event that brought it on, which it is with most things that brings on mental ill health. It's a change in circumstances for a lot of people that brings on the mental health side of things. And going through a divorce, and my mother, and I can laugh and joke about it now, but I moved out of home quite early because of the volatile relationship between my mum and my dad. And then when they ended up separating and splitting up, my mum took it in a real bad way, and she ended up hearing voices, getting all the voices in your head, which you get, and not actually understanding reality. What is reality? And she was getting these voices in her head, and she was believing that it was the neighbours that were talking about her and taking the mick, because of the situation and everything that were going on. And she ended up going on to one of the neighbours' houses, kicking the door in. I can laugh and joke about it now because, watching a 40-year-old woman trying to kick a door down in because she thinks that people are talking bad about her. It is quite a traumatic sight to see, but you've got to laugh and joke about it at the end of it, because, like I say, it's a weird situation to see. And she's on medication for the rest of her life, and she's going to be on medication for the rest of her life because she can't control it. And a few times she's relapsed because she's not had the medication, or she's messed up the medication. So it's been quite a difficult situation for her to be in, and also dealing with it myself. And that's why my beliefs changed a lot when it comes to mental health, because she needs help. The mental side of it, she does need a lot of help with the thought processes and mental ill health. But without the medication, she relapses every time. And understanding that is weird. Like I said, we've all got the voices in our heads. We talk about it when we're playing rugby. You're always wanting to quit, and we get them voices in our heads. But to actually have them voices to tell you to do something as stupid as going to kicking a neighbour's door down because you think that they're talking about you, or you think that that they're taking the mic out, or you're taking the mick out of you, is very, very strange. And it's hard to comprehend. For me personally, that these things happen, but that is the harsh reality of what the schizophrenia is. It can, like I say, not simple, but a change in circumstances, all of a sudden it can trigger it, and that's it. She's diagnosed now for the rest of her life.
Yeah, and it can be brought on by numerous things. And we all think it never happened to us, but it could happen to us. I know the story. I know, conscious of time here, but a kid who drank so much over the weekend that he ended up seeing things when he stopped drinking, and that's what brought it on. And it lasted for a week or so, but it's one of those psychoses we don't know enough about it, and you know a little bit more about treatment. So it's really appreciate you sharing your story, keeping it so personal as well with your mum. I've heard it before. We did the mental health first aid course, so it's great that you're open and talking about it. We're just going to watch a video now. I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you short on that. About it's called The Black Dog. It's about depression.
I had a black dog. His name was Depression. Whenever the black dog made an appearance, I felt empty and life just seemed to slow down. He could surprise me with a visit for no reason or occasion. The black dog made me look and feel older than my years. When the rest of the world seemed to be enjoying life, I could only see it through the black dog. Activities that usually brought me pleasure suddenly ceased to. He liked to ruin my appetite. He chewed up my memory and my ability to concentrate. Doing anything or going anywhere with the black dog required superhuman strength. At social occasions, he'd sniff out what confidence I had and chase it away. My biggest fear was being found out. I worried that people would judge me. Because of the shame and stigma of the black dog, I was constantly worried that I'd be found out. So I invested vast amounts of energy into covering him up. Keeping up an emotional lie is exhausting. Black dog could make me think and say negative things. He could make me irritable and difficult to be around. He would take my love and bury my intimacy. He loved nothing more than to wake me up with highly repetitive and negative thinking. He also liked to remind me how exhausted I was going to be the next day. Having a black dog in your life isn't so much about feeling a bit down, sad or blue. At its worst, it's about being devoid of feeling altogether. As I got older, the black dog got bigger and he started hanging around all the time. I'd chase him off with whatever I thought might send him running. But more often than not, he'd come out on top. Going down became easier than getting up again. So I became rather good at self-medication, which never really helped. Eventually, I felt totally isolated from everything and everyone. The black dog had finally succeeded in hijacking my life. When you lose all joy in life, you can begin to question what the point of it is. Thankfully, this was the time that I sought professional help. This was my first step towards recovery and a major turning point in my life. I learned that it doesn't matter who you are, the black dog affects millions and millions of people. It is an equal opportunity mongrel. I also learned that there was no silver bullet or magic pill. Medication can help some, and others might need a different approach altogether. I also learned that being emotionally genuine and authentic to those who are close to you can be an absolute game changer. Most importantly, I learned not to be afraid of the black dog, and I taught him a few new tricks of my own. The more tired and stressed you are, the louder he barks. So it's important to learn how to quiet your mind. It's been clinically proven that regular exercise can be as effective for treating mild to moderate depression as antidepressants. So go for a walk or a run and leave the mutt behind. Keep a mood journal. Getting your thoughts on paper can be cathartic and often insightful. Also keep track of the things that you have to be grateful for. The most important thing to remember is that no matter how bad it gets, if you take the right steps, talk to the right people, black dog days can and will pass. I wouldn't say that I'm grateful for the black dog, but he's been an incredible teacher. He forced me to reevaluate and simplify my life. I learned that rather than running away from my problems, it's better to embrace them. The black dog may always be part of my life, but he'll never be the beast that he was. We have an understanding. I've learned through knowledge, patience, discipline and humour, the worst black dog can be made to heal.
I think that's a great video what kind of simplifies depression, but it gives a good idea if you don't have much of an idea before that. And it's a great example of somebody who's moved around that continuum, gone from poor mental health, getting the right treatment and guidance and getting to positive mental health again. I think it's a great example, and I think it shows it really well. I'm moving on there. Just to recap what we've covered today, that we've all got mental health. Mental health is fluid and it moves on a regular basis, which not just my two guests have proved today, but the examples we gave. Mental ill health is common, and it's possible to move from negative mental health to positive mental health, moving around that continuum. I just want to look at support now.
Yeah, just on that, Johnny, I think it is as simplistic as saying our thoughts influence our emotions, which influence our behaviour, and that as thoughts are massively on how we behave. So it is as simple as changing your thoughts, but it's not as simple because it takes a lot of work and a lot of hard work to get them positive emotions, and that's what we're talking about when it comes to the mental fitness side of things. That is what needs the hard work, because it is as simple as your thoughts influence your emotions, influence your thoughts, and that. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about mental fitness. It's about controlling them thoughts, getting the positive thoughts, and trying to get yourself out of that black dog situation, because it's always going to be there. It's always going to be there. Like I said, it's about controlling it and curbing it.
I think there's other fitness workshops we're doing which will cover that on the thoughts and how they relate to emotions. Actually, I don't know who's presenting those, but it'd be worth a look. But yeah, I totally agree with you. And for those people who are struggling, there's a support here from obviously Rugby League Cares or Offload. And if Offload's not available, there's the Samaritans and Calm, Hub of Hope. There's plenty actually support online now. You can really find out a lot by just going on and Googling whatever you think. That's the support there for you. I'd just like to finish by thanking you two for being so honest and open. I don't think you genuinely will understand how you doing this will make a difference to people. And I'll just probably finish on, you mentioned it a bit earlier, Woody, about sometimes you'll contact a mate you need to ring. I know through my mental health first aid training, I sometimes recognise signs and symptoms in people. And I know that one text to them, just asking how they are, or a phone call can make a massive difference. So I would also encourage that on that support. If you think somebody's struggling, don't think, oh, I don't know, give them a call, send them a text. You just never know, that might be the opening to a conversation. So thanks, Keith. Thanks, Woody. Thanks for being so open. Really appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.